That's a great question. Now, obviously, all of these are going to have different types of metrics around it. For onboarding, a lot of the stuff that we're doing right now in full transparency is going to be about building, because we're going to put this in place for 2024 and like kind of kick off the end of this year. So a lot of it is project-based tracking and KPIs tied to key milestones around the projects and initiatives to get us to a place where we are ready for 2024. As I think about how we'll be measuring this success, onboarding is going to be really focused on usage and adoption, right? How many of our customers are using the platform as intended, as designed to achieve their goals? So really focusing on the nuances and intricacies around how they take our technology to operationalize it against their business goals and objectives. Now, the cool thing is we track all of our customers' goals in ClientSuccess.
Nice.
So we actually have the ability to see which of our customers are piecing and tracking towards those. So it's usage adoption, it's their ability to achieve their success, so through goal tracking, and really the level of engagement that we're going to be seeing from our customers and participants around that. The second thing is with our technical resourcing and staffing behind that, these technical initiatives, more integrations. So we're going to be tracking how many tools and systems each of our customers are integrated with, what the data flows look like. They're making sure, errors are down, reducing technical support tickets. We have a lot of tickets that come through our technical support channel around these areas. So our goal here is to also, we've been tracking the number of tickets that have come through. We want to reduce the number of tickets. So we're going to be looking at a lot of data around that. And then the last part about education is also going to be tied to some of the KPIs around onboarding with adoption and usage, but then also really paying attention to how our customers engage. So we want to understand customer participation in webinars, how they're engaging and using our community, right? Walkthroughs and all of the flows that we're building in-app for them, right? So we're looking at all of these different things. So there's going to be qualitative and quantitative goals for all of the things that we're looking at. But also, like I said, as we're building, it's going to be all project-based.
Nice.
Well, I think generally speaking, what I've done in the past is I've identified what are the industry benchmarks. Are they good enough? Are they strong enough? And then what are additional KPIs, metrics, or information data sets that I know from my experience that need to be tracked, right? And then we work as a team to say, okay, what are the top 4 or 5 metrics that we think are most important for us to be competitive against the industry? And then what's the one metric, let's call it the North Star, that is our key leading indicator? And that usually is some form of, if you're in video games, maybe it's revenue per day. If you're in SaaS, maybe it's, stickiness and renewal per month. But usually it's something around lifetime value. What's the metric that you use to drive the lifetime value of your client, right? And so you'll have those 4 or 5 sub KPIs or sub metrics, right, that you'll keep monitoring. But really, it's about like, is your stickiness going up? Is your LTV going up? If it is, great. If not, why? And what do you need to experiment to get it to go up? Because in some cases, the industry benchmarks will not give you the information to drive better stickiness, because perhaps the rest of the industry doesn't know. And so I think in some cases you have to think about that outside the box, but in some cases it's good to get a baseline of like inside the box, where are you at and how are you competing? Because then you can then take it to the next level and go outside the box and be the industry leader.
Yeah.
Measurement is a multifaceted model, and NPS is only good if you know the drivers. In fact, I think overall NPS is just one measure of someone's long-term relationship. So, if you've been to a restaurant one time, are you really likely to, how confident are you in recommending that restaurant? But I can measure for your satisfaction for that visit. Loyalty is created via cumulative satisfactory visits, as well as other factors of of each experience that have an positive emotional impact on you. So it's being cognizant of that, and it's measuring all the data that reflects that, including reviews we leave online, any verbatims. It's capturing, more and more companies are capturing video feedback, because video feedback can capture emotions in people's voices. It can track our facial expressions. So getting to what you asked about, if we look at everything I'm not ready to throw NPS on the trash heap yet. I want people to understand, what are all the antecedents of that?
Yep.
What are all the predictors of it? Beginning with transaction satisfaction, the criteria. So if you go to, say, a Chili's restaurant, they're going to ask you like 5 or 6 questions at the end. The first one is generally your overall satisfaction. Then they do a deeper dive into, elements of the service, the food, the atmosphere. Those are all criteria that have been identified of the top predictors of transaction satisfaction. But then it's, what is your, over time, what is your overall satisfaction with the restaurant? And then how likely are you to recommend? Another thing that it gets talked about, but not a whole lot of companies measure it, is customer lifetime value.
Mm-hmm.
And that has so much value, because it's a great way to frame your relationship with your customers. It gets people to think about how long they're with you, how often they transact with you, how those transactions change over time, how change in transactions are a function of loyalty. Because, when we're loyal, we get tunnel vision. Think about where you get your haircut. Do you really, every time you need a haircut, go out and shop around? Or you intend on finding a place that's going to do a great job, right?
Yeah.
We're generally monogamous in our relationships because it saves us time. It saves us energy. We want to find a great place. We want to find restaurants that we love. Variety seeking, some people are really into it. You could argue, well, don't people go to different restaurants? Sure they do. But I bet you they settle in on a group of 4 or 5 they go to a lot. And when we do, there's a few things that will happen. One, we get less sensitive to pricing because we're not as cognizant of other prices around us. But we're also building this new value equation. We're recognizing other benefits of that relationship that maybe we weren't aware of to begin with. It's a personal relationships we've created with people there. We get to know the food and everything else. And we're willing to pay more. It's buying more with the same organization, so I don't have to go seek out others. If everybody understands that in an organization, and then they understand how their role, even deep within the organization, ultimately impacts the customer, it makes them feel better about their job too. Because the research has shown, in general, the right kind of people, and we could talk about what the right kind of person is. Individuals who have a high level of customer centricity, they want to work for customer centric organizations. They want to know how their job impacts the customer. And all this too speaks to the democratization of data in the organization. Data shouldn't just be something that is hoarded and used by upper management to make decisions. It's something that should be shared freely across the organization, so all employees are aware of it. So I know we got a little bit off track, but I think the reality is that technology has changed data, right? More and more, it's about the customer and what their information they're leaving out. And at the same time, customers are better informed now than they ever were. I think they're more empowered. Because 20 years ago, when I started this in academia, word of mouth was very literally word of mouth, not anymore. And if you ask any audience, who do you put greatest trust in? An advertisement from a company or a review from a third party that you read online? They choose that any day.
Absolutely.
Or if I get them, ask them, think about your favorite restaurant and what makes it that way. Now tell me about their advertising strategies. They don't advertise.
They have good food.
Because they don't.
Right.
Yeah, but still, this world we live in, and this is a crazy thing that's going on right now, is we have these very traditional silos, still have marketing. Maybe CX is a subset of that, but still holding on to the traditional model of marketing, and marketing is advertising. And that has to change. It's going to change. For me, the future of CX is reinventing and reimagining the marketing function in an organization.
So we measure success through a variety of different approaches. We have operational metrics, we have business-focused metrics. Our operational ones are everything from unique visitors and overall visitors to the different digital channels that we have, level of engagement. We measure, so we measure activity as well, which is a key one, right? So first one, are we engaging people? And so I mentioned a couple of the metrics we have there. Second one is, what impact is that having on our customers' behavior? So now we're looking at metrics around speed of adoption. How many of our customers are moving? Like, we've identified what the different adoption stages are for each of our products, and how quickly are we moving those customers through the different adoption levels so that they're getting to a point where they're seeing value. So we measure all of that for each different product, et cetera. So are we influencing customer behavior? And then the third sort of bucket of the 3 types of metrics is, and what business impact is that having? So now we're looking at things like renewal rates and comparing that to adoption rates and speed of adoption, and comparing that back to levels of engagement. It's almost like a traditional marketing funnel, but now we're looking at what are the business impacts there? We're looking at what's the impact on our customer support. So this is a cost avoidance type of metric that we're looking at. So we're looking at a variety of metrics, and that having that level or that sort of panoply of metrics helps us do a couple of things. First, it helps us optimize our own practice. So measure what you do, and you'll act on what you measure. So we measure, I just mentioned a few things. We've got probably 12 to 15 different dashboards that we're looking at overall. So we can measure every part of our business operationally so that we know where to optimize. And then secondly, when we're working with our business stakeholders, whether that be in the BUs or whether that be stakeholders in the executive suite, we're talking to them more about business metrics. How is an investment that we want them to make in what we're doing, how is that going to have an impact on their business? Or if we're trying to bring one of those business units that I referenced earlier that is sort of doing their own thing in their own way because they're an acquisition that we brought on a year or 2 ago, how do we convince them to give up their way and join sort of the broader Cisco way? It's by showing them the business impact that we've had on other business units who take the same step. So that's how we use these metrics.
That's the proof is in the pudding. You mentioned earlier you do customer advisory boards. I'm sure. Do you guys do stop churn? Seemed like a big problem, right? Retention. Did you guys do like retention interviews, churn interviews, win-loss interviews, surveys? Do you guys use all sorts of these other types of tools to gather data points that maybe not the product metrics give you?
Yeah, we're looking at everything from digital breadcrumbs, where customers are going in all the different digital channels, and sort of tying that in. We're also we're sending out surveys, we're doing focus groups, we do a lot of one-on-one work with customers, and we do everything that we do when it comes to figuring out what our strategy should be, and in particular, our execution elements. So the customer journeys, the digital sides of that we put together, all the journey mapping. All of that comes from conversations that we have with customers, intentional conversations to understand their pain points, mapping that out and understanding their moments that matter, not the moments that we assume matter.
Yes.
So it's all very customer focused. And then making sure that we are sharing that information in a closed loop process internal to Cisco with the other teams that need to hear that: engineering, sales, marketing, BU leadership, et cetera.
That's one.
Yeah, I think you have to ask the right questions. Again, it's that listening approach. Don't show up with all the solutions, right? Ask the questions, even if they're super obvious, even if you know what the answer is going to be. Number one, it enables the stakeholders to feel like they've had a place in that ideation, in that decision making, right? They're a part of the process. But it also ensures that there is at least discussion. There may be some discovery as a result of going through the most obvious process or question. So ask the right questions and challenge the business. Okay, that sounds right. Is there data? Can you show me, right? And then I think the most important thing in keeping that credibility is you're never wrong by asking the question in whatever meeting it is, whatever process we're discussing, how does this affect the customer? if you can remain that absolute advocate for the customer, you're always going to have credibility. Now, you might be a nuisance. There might be some who don't love the fact that you're throwing a wrench in every plan, but at least you can come back to that point that I am the advocate for the customer. I represent them in every discussion, and I've got to make sure that we're delivering value for them. I think that's how you maintain that credibility and really establish that presence within your stakeholders and that leadership team.
Yeah, in a customer service world, again, it all goes back to those three. So fast, how quickly do you want to answer the phone? What do your customers, now there's a trade-off, right? If you have 100 people trained and you can answer the phone immediately, you might have some quality issues or some expense issues. So, that first one really that a person looks at is how quickly are you, whether it's answering the phone or answering a chat or answering a text or responding to social media, but that's usually kind of your baseline. And understanding, looking at the workforce management piece, looking at past call arrival patterns or request arrival patterns and understanding what you need there. So looking at how quickly you're responding, what your abandonment rate is really kind of one of the foundational pieces. And then next would be, kind of the quality piece, putting quality metrics in place. What's really nice now is for years, the only way you did quality is you listened to calls and you did a score sheet. Now, there's so much technology out there that you can have real-time speech analytics. You can really understand tone and sentiment, both of an agent and of a customer. And when the customer's tone starts to go sideways, probably so does the agents eventually. So those are things that are so exciting right now in the industry, with automation and with AI and with natural language things that we really didn't have 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that I'm really excited about. So you've got that speed, you've got that quality. And then the next thing that I think you really look at is just really understanding that cost, right? That if you had a blank check or, unlimited budget, you could always answer the phone or respond quickly. You could always have great quality, but that's just not the world we live in, especially not maybe today. And so really understanding what are feasible items that you're willing to, what's the framework that you can work with from a budget standpoint?
Well, if it's a company who just want to fix a pain point, we'll measure it with reviews, number of calls. We might get more sophisticated and look at cost reduction. I think often when we're resolving a customer experience problem, there's a big cost reduction to be had, which a lot of people just forget about, and I like to make sure that we drive through to getting that cost reduction. On the other hand, of course, retention of customers is big. I do of course use customer experience perception metrics, NPS, CSAT, CES, but I think they often feel is it woolly? I think I'm looking for the word woolly. They often feel woolly to people. There's a bit of a so what? If my NPS goes up 10 points, what does that mean? We can all see and sell cost improvement or a retention of customer.
So we're doing a lot of things, right? We measure a lot of things, and we measure the traditional, I guess, operational, net promoter scores, CSATs, also all of the financials, retention rates of all kinds and churn rates and whatnot, right? So we have a very mature organization from that perspective. But again, I'm interested more in not a score or a number, but the emotional response behind it. So what we do after every CSAT survey or Net Promoter Score survey, we actually have an interview with our customers to understand anything under the score of 9, let's say, so anything that's not a very happy promoter, what is the trouble? I want to know deeper. I want to know more. I want to know behind the score and the number, what gets us to a 1-point improvement? How do I get the customer from, let's say, a 6 to a 7? What is their thought process? And I'm more alarmed when I see a customer who gives me a 6 today was a 9 or a 7 yesterday. So how do I make sure our customers, as they get more and more accustomed to us as a company and to our product, they stay at that level of advocacy and happiness, and they actually grow that, and they become lifelong partners for Cority. That's very important to me. So kind of a long-fledged answer, but I hope you got that. So for every single customer, we look at their trend along the years, not just at their moment in time. So when we understand how their relationship is evolving, I need to understand the history before we make a judgment call around how is it really going on right now.
Well, the heart and the science, the heart is harder to measure. However, you know that people stay. You can really see and measure the relationship if a customer renews that contract, right? Especially if it's a renewal basis, or if they come and they buy again, or if you have a referral program and it's working, you could see the referrals. And a lot of it is really the soft skills and the training of people and the empathy part of the business, and it's the culture. So I'm mentioning a lot of broad things, but going deep, whereas the metrics and the science of it is measurements, closing the loop so that the information you get gets to the right department. It's breaking the silos, those data silos that many companies have that information all over the place and nobody's looking at it holistically. The voice of the customer, you've got it in social media, you've got chat logs, you've got so much data, but is somebody actually looking at it and aggregating it and prioritizing the decisions from it? So again, we dig in where it's working and not working, and it's iterative because there's so much new technology. Customer needs are changing. So you're never done. You got to start and keep optimizing.
Yeah, it's really, really critical in many ways for me, the thing that I'm most passionate about, because, you know, you've heard the saying, you can't have a great customer experience if you don't have engaged and inspired employees. And so I believe it's much more than a survey once or twice a year. To me, that's a lagging indicator, right? You should know how your employees are feeling about the experience that they are delivering to your customers every single day. And so I'm a big believer in a few things. One is including them in the defining what those success measures should be, to building consistent service and or experience behaviors that ladder up to your overall CX vision and strategy. So then you can build the programs, as I mentioned before, recruiting, training, recognition around those particular behaviors. And I talk about it in ways of it's top down and across. So it's got to start at the C-suite level. It's got to be certainly, I call the rubber that meets the road in the operational leaders, because every single day they're the ones that have to make that happen and make those experiences actually work consistently over time. And then the frontline folks, whether you're in a call center, a contact center, or frontline in a store or online, you are the person that's delivering that experience. So it's kind of getting all areas of the organization aligned, not just with the metrics, right, but with the how they deliver the experience every single day.
Yeah. So I would break it down into two parts. One is the success from a business standpoint. How is customer success making the larger company successful? I know a lot of success within answers. So I always strongly believe that gross revenue retention is the most important metric that the group needs to work for. The caveat is it's gross revenue retention when you don't have revenue quotas or goals associated with the customer success team. So being able to retain the customer is important, but it's a lagging metric. Like you don't know if you're being successful until down the road. So the things that are important to measure early on are things that feed into retention, and things like time to value, how much engagement or adoption you have, what customer feedback are you getting? And those things, if they're going well, allow you to have more comfort in believing that you're going to retain the customer. From a team, more specific team or more individual perspective, what I measure, what I think is important to measure or to capture is what kinds of references or how many references is each CSM getting? How many CSQLs or customer success qualified leads are they passing off to sales or account management? The other piece I think it influences me quite a bit because I was managing during, it was called the COVID tsunami, where I think it was early in 2021 where all the HR people were talking to each other and saying there are going to be a lot of people who leave their jobs and find something different. So having the team stay, so retention, not just of customers, but retention of my team and them getting promotions and them getting the recognition is also something that I think is really important for me to measure as a leader.
So yes, value stories drive renewals. Renewals to me and net revenue retention define success to me because there's multiple things. Like I KPI our CS department on GRR and NRR, so separately, right? GRR and then upsells.
Can you let me know what GRR and NRR are?
Yes, gross revenue retention and net revenue retention.
Perfect,
but if we were gross revenue retention being the existing business and ensuring that that gets renewed, and then above and beyond that, what's the upsell potential with our existing customer base that has led to that ultimate NRR? So that's GRR and NRR, and then value stories. I do look at those value stories as almost like money because we can put them in marketing decks. We can quote, even if we can't use a logo or the specific, individual's quote, we can reference that it's a, chief revenue officer for one of our customers, right? In a particular industry. Being able to, what I also consider success is business reviews and making sure that they're being done because there's just so much power in those business reviews if people can understand the value that they're getting in having them. So from a department standpoint, I have a lot of internal projects that I'm always like working on, but from an IC standpoint, what they should be always driving towards is those business reviews, are those value stories, and then ultimately helping drive high GRR, high NRR.
Yeah, so the integration strategy is a little bit more further along and built out, and the most critical success metrics we're looking at are really just ideally keeping net revenue retention. And a net revenue retention is defined a little bit differently here. I think first and foremost, we have a churn number that we forecast every year. We want to keep churn below that number for our customers. We'd like to retain our customers, retain the revenue that we have. But in addition to that, as we look at this integration, we're looking at how do we grow the product suites that each of our customers are having. So instead of continuing to sell through one division, how do we work more with our cross-divisional partners to sell additional Tyler product lines into this customer account? And so net revenue retention is moving from the revenue that they were paying for one specific product and one specific division to what does the net revenue retention across all of our Tyler product lines look like for these customers? For the more like holistic strategy, we don't really have metrics yet because that's so early stage. But I think some of the most critical things are going to be looking at the CSAT scores and NPS and making sure initially customer satisfaction is positive one, while we're also continuing to maintain that net revenue retention.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's some simple things you can do, right? I mean, renewal rates, you can look at engagement, you can look at NPS scores, you can look at referrals. I think some of the standard things you could be doing. I mean, it probably a big thing about your business model. Like how are you defining, now that I'm kind of looking at, how is the company profitable? How do you define that as, the contribution from each of the divisions, and figuring out how you can, you make sure that your utilization rates and your margins and your efficiencies are all happening within each of the teams, making sure that each of the individual understands how they're being measured in success towards the profitability of the organization, I think is a key one. So, I think for a CS team, really focusing on yeah, I think, hitting those milestone moments, like the time to value for an account, celebrating that, moving them from stable to growth, or, if they're at risk, turning those risks around. I mean, every account you renew or grow or, don't lose is a huge, huge win. So, I think for anyone that's in the reoccurring revenue, business model, it's that retention of revenue and really understanding, when you hit the milestone of profitability for an account, celebrate that. I mean, that's a pretty big one. Like I said, I mean, my experience it is usually year 2. So getting that first year renewal is huge, because that means that, that is going to contribute to your ability to then look at scaling, and putting more money into marketing and putting more money into going out and getting new customers, and then hopefully, tracking things like, your, God, I'm totally spaced on the acronym, but the referral growth rate, which I know kind of goes hand in hand with your net reoccurring revenue in the sense of, but again, if you get a referral business or returning customer, making sure you work with your, finance team and separate out the cost acquisition out of that, because that customer is already profitable. And so making sure you celebrate and reward the teams who are, or the referral partner who brought you that business, because that's free money.